A woman meets a man, falls in love, they live together, he disappears. She then finds out he was an undercover cop sent to spy on her. It really happened. We're going to meet Alison.
BBC Radio 2.
Now, imagine what it would be like to be in a relationship with somebody you loved for years, only for them to one day completely disappear. Then you go on to find out that they weren't who they said they were. They had a completely false identity. They'd entered into a relationship with you in order to infiltrate a group that you were a member of. Hard to imagine, isn't it? Well, this is exactly what happened to over 60 women who unknowingly entered into relationships with undercover policemen over a period of 40 years. In 2015, an undercover policing inquiry was set up by the Home Secretary to examine how approximately 140 undercover police officers spied on thousands of predominantly left-wing campaigners between 1968 and 2010. Central to this is how officers routinely formed intimate romantic relationships with women, concealing their true identities from them. Many of them were long-term sexual relationships. The inquiry's ongoing. It's really important. It's now started hearing from some of the women who were deceived. And we're going to speak to one in a moment who's in the studio with me now. But I'd love to know if you're familiar with the case, or you knew somebody involved, one of the women maybe, or one of the men. Text us 88291, do email vine@bbc.co.uk, and include your number when you do. WhatsApp us as well, 08000 288 291, or use Alexa. So we are, and everyone for this lady is using the name Alison. Alison from London, welcome to you.
Hello, Jeremy.
Unknowingly in a relationship with an undercover Met Police officer. Now, we were discussing what you were doing and why you were targeted, and I said environmentalist. That's wrong, actually, earlier. So you've been involved in something called the Colin Roach Centre. Just tell us about that.
So the Colin Roach Centre was a non-aligned political group in Hackney. It was a campaigning centre, campaigned on a number of issues. A key one being police accountability. There had been a lot of police corruption in Hackney that the Hackney Community Defence Association, a precursor of the Colin Roach Centre, had exposed. My particular areas of interest, I was a school teacher, and I was interested in, and still am, anti-racism, anti-fascism, and trade union politics.
Okay, so would you even call yourself an activist, or was there someone who was kind of just getting on the fringes of these things?
I don't like the word activist, because I think that what that does when members of the public hear that, it makes us somehow different from them. And I think it makes it difficult to connect with the story. People feel, oh, well, that wouldn't happen to me because I'm not an activist. My daughter's not an activist. And I think of myself more, certainly in those days, as a school teacher. And I was, just like all the other people who were spied upon, not just in our group, but much more widely, I was involved in grassroots political campaigning and collective organising, which is, it's what you want to be doing in a democracy.
Sure.
That's how functioning democracies operate.
Yeah, and then this guy turns up, and you know him as Mark Cassidy.
Yeah.
How do you meet him?
He comes and he's brought by one of the organisers in the centre to a meeting because he arrived at Mark Cassidy turned up at a We Remember a meeting in Hackney, which was for the Trevor Munnerville campaign. So the Munnerville family had their son was killed in contact with the police, and this was a family justice campaign. And Mark Cassidy turned up at that meeting, spoke to one of the members of the centre, and said he was interested in what we did, and he was brought along. Okay,
and you and he struck up a conversation?
I can't remember that first meeting exactly, but he was from Birkenhead. He was ironically, he was very authentic, working class joiner. I found him very attractive. He's very personable, very affable, quite understated, presented himself as someone who's wanted to learn and understand about what was going on in politics in London. And, over a period of weeks, he came to meetings, and after meetings we go to the pub, and, I got talking to him, and it kind of started from there.
We could say you fell in love.
Well, eventually, I wouldn't say I fell in love straight away, but certainly our relationship became sexual and intimate within a few weeks or a couple of months. And I would definitely say within a year I was in love with him, yes.
Right, and at this point he seems like a lovely guy. He's called Mark Cassidy. We think he's a joiner.
Yeah, at that point, yeah.
Right. Did you ever see him doing any fitting a kitchen or something?
Well, without stereotyping, Jeremy, I come from a sort of North London middle-class Jewish family, and, you know, outward activities in my family were sort of a roast chicken picnic on Hampstead Heath. And I never saw my dad do anything with a drill or any, you know, manual tools. So by my standards, he was pretty capable. Do you know what I mean? He put up shelves, he put a flat roof on for us. When he came to fit the kitchen towards the end of the relationship, he did struggle with the router. But, you know, he just said, well, you know, I hadn't used one of these before, and so it was only afterwards when I started to suspect that he was a police officer or a member of the security services, or certainly an undercover operative of some sort, that I reflected on his joinery skills and realised perhaps they were not what they should have been.
I know that over the years you will have been asked so many versions of this, but it's about your suspicions of him when you were together.
Yeah.
And one of the key areas with these people was whether they had any friends or you know, even relatives, parents they could introduce you to.
Yeah.
And they always seem to make excuses.
There was a tradecraft manual that they were taught how to create their legend. They were state-sponsored con men. These aren't just like normal men who deceive women, you know. They had fake passports, they had fake driving licenses, they had fake national insurance numbers. And they were skilled in lying, and they were prepared. They'd done their role plays for every question. So there was a whole story about childhood trauma, and his dad had died and been killed by a drunken driver, and that's why he never went over the limit with drinking, and that's why he could always drive after the pub and take people home in his van and find out where everybody lived.
I was going to say that having a van was a thing at the time. And then being the guy who gave everyone a lift was actually, as it turned out, important. Is that right?
Yeah, and, you know, I know we won't be able to do that now today, but I'd hope listeners will look more into the story to see the systemic abuse of the way these officers work, because Mark is one example. There are so many of these officers. One of them, Carlo Saracchi, he was a locksmith. Well, that's useful, isn't it, if you want to get into the people you're spying on's home. So, yes, Mark... They all had a vehicle. Mark had a van. He was very affable and took people home afterwards, finding out where they lived.
In terms of people finding out more about this story, the Guardian's coverage has been brilliant, but also, and BBC as well. But also, there's a fantastic, it's a documentary, isn't it, on ITV, which when I met you by chance recently, you directed me to, and I've watched it, and it's mind-boggling because of the deception. Because actually, when you find out. There's so much here, isn't there? Because eventually, when you find out who that guy was, turns out he was married with his own kids.
He was married throughout the whole time, yes.
And do you think his wife was saying, oh, it's fine, go ahead and have a sexual relationship because it's professional?
Well, I can segue nicely into the public inquiry from this week.
Well, go on, tell me.
Because I gave evidence on Monday to the public inquiry, and on Tuesday, a woman known as S gave evidence about her relationship with Mark, and that was Mark's wife. And what becomes absolutely clear is that, of course, she didn't know. In fact, she put her life on hold for 5 years for him to pursue his career and do what she was told was very dangerous work. And it's also evidence of the institutionalised misogyny and sexism within the Met Police, because she was meeting his managers at Christmas dues, where she was being told that how well he was doing. Furthermore, I've seen in disclosure, which is beyond shocking, and again, Mark Jenner is not the only one that this has happened to, he got a commendation during these years for his excellent work to policing.
Did the police authorities know that he was sleeping with his target?
Well, that's one of the things that we're trying to find out. I mean, if you ask any of the people involved in this inquiry, it's become absolutely apparent that, of course, they knew. There are 2 officers who've given evidence that they said they did know. Most of them say, oh, I can't remember. They've got a very bad dose of amnesia. So it's going to be very interesting to hear what Mark Jenner says, because he's giving evidence next week.
OK. And you've since connected with some of the other deceived women, and that's been crucial as well.
Yeah, that I was involved in bringing one of the earliest civil claims against the Met Police for being deceived into these relationships. There were 8 of us who brought that claim in 2011, and from that we formed our campaign and support group, Police Spies Out of Lives, which has been, you know, an absolute lifeline for all of us. I mean, there aren't many people who really fully understand the trauma and upset and psychological damage that has been caused by these undercover operations. And the idea that the managers didn't know is really literally incredible. It's not believable.
Let me play some music and then come back to you, because this is just the most amazing story. Alison talking about the man who had a relationship with her, not telling her that he was an undercover police officer trying to spy on her and her friends. Jeremy Vine here with this amazing story. We're with Alison, who's sitting opposite me. That's not her real name. She hasn't been identified in public, but she was unknowingly in a relationship with an undercover Met police officer. He was trying to spy on people the Met thought were maybe activists or subversive in some way. Alison plainly wasn't, and then he gets into a physical relationship, and then one day he simply disappears. Is that right?
That's right.
So tell me about that day, because this is the most dramatic moment of the story.
It was devastating. I mean, it didn't make any sense. He left a note on the table. I called him. I was hysterical. I persuaded him to come back at the weekend. He came back. He said, OK, I understand, I'll come back. He did come back for about 2 weeks, and then he left again with another note on the table. And within a matter of and I started searching for him straight away. It didn't make sense.
So no explanation, just disappeared.
He wasn't he had to get his head together. Psychological trouble, Yeah. Didn't want the children that I wanted. I mean, we were in relationship counselling for 18 months. Because I wanted children and he didn't. That's because he had some. But he disappeared, and I started searching for him, and within a few weeks, after a conversation I had with somebody else, I started to think, hang on a minute, you're a spook. That's why you've left.
Wow, you got onto it, right?
Yeah, within a few weeks.
Wow.
It was something that somebody else had said, but it did suddenly make me think that is the only explanation that makes sense. But of course, this is 25 years ago, but way before any of this has been exposed, and everybody, with very few exceptions, understandably, thought I was completely mad.
Did you? So you, and in this ITV documentary, we see this amazing squad of betrayed women in a room, all realising it's happened to all of them with different men. What was it like to join the dots?
It was very powerful and very affirming, and personally for me, because I had all those years where people really didn't believe me, and I was for several years quite obsessed and quite unwell psychologically, trying to make sense of it, being with the other women and everything that's happened since actually has been validating and affirming. And the reason we're involved in this campaign, the reason I'm talking to you now, Jeremy, really, is because we want to make sure it doesn't happen again.
I thought it was because your husband was a massive fan of the show. That's a little shout out to him. Yes.
That too. No, it's about it never happening to other people again. It's about there being a real shift in the culture, that this inquiry makes recommendations for legislative change. Because at the moment, the police guidelines have changed. The College of Policing guidelines in 2024 now explicitly prohibit undercover operatives having sex with members of the public. Unbelievable that it needs putting in writing on duty. But we need that to be in law. We need it to be a crime. Some
of the women had children with the cops who then disappeared and left them with the children.
Yeah.
I guess it's difficult to regret that, but that must be quite traumatising.
Yeah, I mean, because that's not my story, we're always very careful about not talking about each other's stories unless we've been granted specific permission. But of course, that has been in the public domain, and it is beyond appalling. However, the other element of that sometimes is less explored is how these officers stole the most fertile years of some women's lives. And there were many women who lost the opportunity to have children, either because they were with these officers for 2, 3, 4 years, or because the damage was so great that they were unable to trust anyone else again to have a future successful relationship. And, but also these men had set such a high standard of what these relationships looked like. They were so idealised because they were just playing out an alter ego. They weren't their real selves, that for some of the women they struggled for that reason as well. So the damage has been, enormous.
I've got an email from Tristan in Enfield, and I don't think you'll appreciate this, but I want to read it to you, Alison. Tristan says this: they, the cops, should be able to do whatever they want. These undercover police officers have got to be 100% secretive. We need these guys to protect us. Don't blow their covers. Everyone loves detective programs and praises the guys on TV. Well, it's based on real life.
Thank you, Tristan. So I think maybe what Tristan is talking about is undercover police in policing legitimate targets. And when we came together as a group, we really tussled with the idea, because we're quite a wide group of women with very different political views, and some people don't, are in the defund the police position, others are absolutely not, and think that undercover policing is a legitimate tactic when used against specific criminal gangs. Firstly, the type of policing that is being looked at in the inquiry at the moment is absolutely not the sort that is being suggested by your listener. But moreover, imagine the most heinous crime. Imagine a paedophile gang. Would we task an undercover police officer to have sex with a child in order to infiltrate that gang? Of course we wouldn't. That's not what a civilised society does. That's not a job.
That would be
for
illegal,
someone.
yeah.
Well, at the moment it wouldn't, actually, because the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Act
you can do anything.
Means there are no limits to a criminal conduct authorisation. We're told the Human Rights Act will protect people against those sorts of abuses, but in our case it clearly didn't. And at the moment there are no limits to what can be authorised, and what we're saying is that there must be explicit limits in that act. No murder, no torture, no rape.
There was an apology. This is a video apology given by the former Assistant Commissioner of the Met, Martin Hewitt, about 10 years ago. Let's have a listen.
Thanks in large part to the courage and tenacity of these women in bringing these matters to light, it has become apparent that some officers, acting undercover while seeking to infiltrate protest groups, entered into long-term intimate sexual relationships with women, which were abusive, deceitful, manipulative and wrong. I acknowledge that these relationships were a violation of the women's human rights, an abuse of police power, and caused significant trauma. I unreservedly apologise on behalf of the Metropolitan Police Service.
So his name, the name of the guy in your life was, you thought Mark Cassidy, was actually Mark Jenner. Did you ever have any contact again with him after he left?
Yes. And before I tell you about that, I just want to reinforce that apology from the Met Police, and they have apologised again through the public inquiry. So going back to Tristan's point and other people's points, probably, the Met themselves admit this is completely unacceptable. There's no justification for these sexual intimate relationships with women and with on-duty undercover officers. So in 2019, I tracked Mark Jenner down. He was walking the Pennine Way. He was foolish enough to post the hotel he was staying in one night on his Facebook. I said to my family, we were on holiday, and said, shall I ring him? And they said yes. So we were on holiday ourselves. I went to the beach. I called the number. The person in the hotel said, he's not here at the moment. He's coming down for dinner in an hour. Why don't you call back then? Okay. So I did. And he came to the phone, and he said, hello. And I said, hello. And he said, who's that? And I said, do you not recognise my voice? It's Alison. And he said, oh, beep. How do you know where I am? So he swore, and how do you know where I am? And I told him, you put it on Facebook. And we had a half-an-hour conversation, which is in my witness statement, which is on the inquiry's website, so you can read that. But basically, he said it's been absolutely terrible for him, and I'm sure that's what we're going to hear next week, about how awful it's been for him. He said that he knew I deserved an explanation. And afterwards, I spoke to my lawyer about the conversation, and she said, did he apologise? And I said, I don't think he did. And she said, I think you would have remembered if he apologised. Which leads me to next week, actually. Mark Jenner is giving evidence next week. And one of the pleas that I have for his evidence, and for all of the managers and other officers who are yet to give evidence in this inquiry, to come clean. The truth will set them free. They have to really dig down into their memories and unearth their buried consciences, and just tell the truth about what was going on.
All right. Well, listen, thank you, Alison. That's just amazing. Alison from London, unknowingly in a relationship with an undercover Met Police officer. His real name is Mark Jenner. He will be questioned next week at the inquiry. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
BBC Radio.